Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be going through a list of books that I think the hype surrounding them is perplexing. Some of these books are books I actually really enjoy, but I am shocked that they have reached a certain level of mainstream, I guess you could say, within their given genres for various different reasons. And then some of these I just legitimately don't understand. If you have kept up with my videos, this is kind of inspired by the book Fourth Wing. So the book Fourth Wing, every single time I bring it up, I'm talking about the fact that it recently came out, and before it came out there was already hundreds of ratings, and those ratings were almost exclusively 5 stars. And then after it came out, it immediately started getting thousands of ratings, and they were still mostly 5 stars. And I was like, what is going on? And this probably sounds like me on repeat, because this is what I've been saying every single time I bring it up. And it's still almost painfully high. Not because I'm like, it doesn't deserve it, but because there's so many other books that I think do deserve that level of hype or really high ratings. So the list of books today, it's kind of inspired by that. It's just hype that fascinates me and that I also find slightly confusing. So I'm actually going to start with one that I'm glad has as much hype as it does, because it's one of my favorite series of all time. And that would be The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I think if he had started his career with this series, one, I don't know that it would have even been published. And two, I don't know that all that many readers would have pushed through the amount of time it takes before things really start to come together and things really start to pick up, which isn't to say that I don't think that it's worth it. I love that series. I love the characters. I love the exploration of who they are, what makes them who they are, why they have certain views toward their world. I love those books, but they're all over 1,000 pages, and they do take so much time, and they do, I think, require a level of trust. And when I was saying before, I don't think this would have worked if he had started with this. One, he was a very different writer, I'm sure, when he first started, as most writers are. They grow as they write, and their careers, they have different kinds of stories they want to write, or they want to write characters in different ways. So, of course, it would have been a different series. In fact, he has The Way of Kings Prime, which was sort of his first go at Stormlight Archive. But regardless, I think it is through all the other works that he has published that he has earned his readers' trust, and that is why they are willing to go into this series, because they have an understanding the payoff will be worth it. These things are going to come together. He does everything with intention. This isn't here pointlessly, even if it might feel pointless or unnecessary or tedious right now. But still, even with all of that, even if you are an author who's established a fairly loyal group of readers who are willing to stick with you, I still think that it's interesting that this has reached that level where you do see this listed as one of the greatest fantasy series of all time, because there is a certain amount of people outside of, I guess you could say, the fandom, that I'm surprised they too are willing to push through these books. And there are people who don't typically read fantasy that have heard great things about the Stormlight Archive, and they will give it a shot. And that's really exciting to see. I also hope that that means that in the future, as more epic fantasy books really decide to go this route where they take their time and they really want to establish the foundation so that they can build upon it very firmly, I hope that readers will continue to give that trust, even if it's an author who maybe doesn't have the amount of books under their belt that Sanderson does. Now getting into one where I feel a little bad bringing this one up, because I think most people didn't really enjoy this one, and that would be Book of Night by Holly Black. Book of Night, I think that it just being a Holly Black book, and I think it was the first thing she'd put out since she'd finished Folk of the Air, maybe first full novel, because she had some other things pop up that were in her Folk of the Air series, and it being an adult fantasy work rather than young adult. And because the concept sounded really cool, a lot of people were excited for it. And that makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is that there was special edition after special edition after special edition. There were so many special editions. And a lot of times the teams that make these special editions, these subscription book boxes, they, I believe, will get their hands on the book early because they're trying to decide what to make special editions of. You don't want to just make the hyped books. You don't just want to make what everybody is excited for as your special editions, because one, you run the risk of all these other special edition book boxes doing the same book, which happens from time to time, and that's going to make sense. But you also run the risk of, if you're not reading the books ahead of time to see if you think they're really high quality and that they are going to show that your service puts out books that are genuinely good or agreed upon by a lot of people to be good. That's subjective, of course, but still, it could affect your reputation if you're just pumping out whatever is popular. So I think a lot of times, unless I'm incorrect about this, they read the books beforehand so that they don't develop a negative reputation. And it's the fact that there were so many special editions, and that, in my mind, says either these different special edition companies didn't read the book, or they did and they all liked it, and then the rest of us kind of collectively didn't. And of course there's going to be the occasional person that really enjoyed that. So I'm not saying it is objectively terrible. Don't we all agree? Kind of was a swing and a miss for a lot of people. The general consensus was that, or at least what I saw, is that a lot of people enjoyed the premise of it, but it didn't feel completely fleshed out. That was my takeaway, and it seemed like a lot of people's takeaway. It makes me wonder if it was one of those books where publishing figured, well, it's Holly Black. She's a big name, and she has a large readership, so they'll follow her wherever she goes. We don't need to take as much time to edit this and make sure it's really her best work. Let's just get it out, because it'll sell. That's a conversation a lot of people have when they're talking about hyped books. People say that about Sanderson. People say that about Sarah J. Maas, that the editing doesn't really happen as thoroughly because why does it need to? People are going to read it and love it anyway. And this is one of those instances where that didn't really happen. But the hype around this book, it was surprising because of the fact that it didn't seem like Holly Black's best work. And I'm just still confused to this day why so many book subscription boxes. I guess they figured it would sell. I guess they kind of did what publishing did. I don't know. Anyway, next up, we have Gild and Glint. So this is a King Midas retelling. This is one of those series where it seems to have gotten a lot of hype from different communities than where I typically see or where I typically fall within. But I'm always willing to give things a try from different areas. I try not to approach book talk recommendations or certain tables at the bookstore. I try not to go into it being like, and thinking I'm above it and these people have terrible taste or anything. I try not to be a snob, is what I'm saying. I think there's good books to be found in all different corners. So I was like, I'll give this one a try. And the first book is pretty universally not loved. It has a pretty low-ish average rating. It's 3.63. And then the sequel, I made sure to take a screenshot. The sequel has a much higher average rating. It has 4.20, which is pretty good. And it has close to 80,000 ratings. And what surprises me is that many people didn't really like the first one. And then they're like, I'll still keep going though. And then they tried the second one and really liked it. The first one, I ended up DNFing this series, but I do tell people if they want to check it out, you probably do want to check out the second one because the first one just feels so incredibly incomplete. It's really short. It kind of feels like a very long prologue in a sense, or it feels like the first chunk of chapters and that it should be smushed together with the second book. But regardless, there's almost like a strange, I'm sad for other authors because readers don't typically give that much of a chance if they see that low of an average rating for a first book in a series. And second, if they themselves read the book and they didn't really like it, it is rare for people to be like, I'm going to keep going though. There's always those completionists that whatever series they pick up, they're going to finish. But it still is quite surprising that many people were like, yeah, let's keep going. Next step, another one that I love, and I am surprised that it's as loved as it is. And that would be Full Metal Alchemist. I love Full Metal Alchemist. There it is, over there. I love it. It's perfect. I love Full Metal Alchemist. And Full Metal Alchemist is considered within anime and manga circles to be one of the greatest of all time. So That's great. Yay. It makes me a little bit sad that I think BookTube itself doesn't... I think BookTube still doesn't necessarily see manga as on par in quality and storytelling as fantasy novels or novels in general. I actually asked a bunch of you to submit some assumptions, and over on my side channel where I read manga and comics and talk about video games and some of my other interests that involve storytelling, I've been reacting to those assumptions, and it's a little disheartening because I'm like, I swear, I understand some of your assumptions, but truly, what becomes mega popular is often not an indication of what the entire medium has to offer. So I get it if you've seen Dragon Ball or some clips of One Piece or things like that, and you're like, I don't really think this is for me. And I'm like, I know, that's okay. Those aren't for you, but I promise there's a lot that you would probably find that you would like. But anyway, I digress. The point is, Full Metal Alchemist, it's so just, the characters, Edward is a lot. And when I reread it before, because the first time I was like, wow, Edward has just really heightened emotions all the time. And then the second time I was like, oh, am I Edward? As soon as he starts to feel deeper emotions, he's deflecting and he's just choosing to kind of be loud and things like that. I'm like, oh, I am Edward. But I still think he's so endearing and I love him so much. And I love so many of the characters in that series so much. But the opening of Full Metal absolutely, in my opinion, does not really give you a good indication of everything you're going to get with it. So I just think it's not the strongest start. And on top of that, there's just this, like I was saying about Edward's heightened emotions, there is this sense that it's going to be up here the whole time, that it's going to be silly and lots of jokes and goofy, and we're not really going to dig deep. And you do, and you get such fantastic character moments, you get really well-represented themes, you get so many things in it that are so fantastic, but that start, I don't really think shows that, and I also just think that it's kind of an ask of people, similar to what I was saying about Way of Kings, where you're like, oh man, you're just gonna have to push through it. So it's remarkable to me that so many people have, that they have pushed through it, and they have trusted that the story will have a great payoff. It's really shocking to me, because almost verbatim what I was saying about Way of Kings. Or even Guild and Glint. I don't know what it is about certain stories that readers decide, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to keep giving this a chance. But Full Metal Alchemist has that, which makes me happy because I love it so much. Step is one that I don't get the hype for this one at all, in any way. And that would be Name of the Wind. I know there's a lot of Name of the Wind fans. I know there's a lot of people that are like, I'm mad that it's not done, but I still love it. And it's still great. And the writing is so beautiful. And I'm like, Kvothe is so annoying. He's so annoying. He, I feel like, single-handedly ruins his own story. I don't understand. He's supposed to be telling me about his life and this interesting, fascinating life he's lived. And so I get there's going to be embellishments, or I get that maybe he's an unreliable narrator, but I at least expect to enjoy his story, but he is so annoying. He's so obnoxious. And I also think I'm very picky about how characters respond to poverty, because there is a part of the story where Kvothe is not financially well off, and he's just barely scraping by and surviving. And I think a lot of you know that my father grew up in extreme poverty. He, at one point when he was a little boy, was living in an abandoned train car. He often worked on farms. He ended up getting skin cancer from being in the sun all the time because he was constantly picking cotton outside as a little boy. And he lived sometimes in hay barns. I mean, just extreme poverty. And Kvothe just has this really obnoxious sense of pride sometimes where I get irritated. I just get irritated. I get irritated at how he acts, because he's so flippant sometimes with kindness that people will show him, and then other times he feels like the things that people are offering him, he's like, yes, I'll accept this. And he just doesn't make sense to me as a character. I don't know. I just find him, I don't know if it's like I hear my dad in my head, that if Name of the Wind was a movie, I could just hear my dad being like, this guy's an idiot. I don't know what it is. I find Kvothe so annoying. So, and also, of course, the fact that there are so many embellishments that that don't make me like him more. I would kind of get it if he just came across very cool and suave, and you're like, this guy's awesome, and you're like, maybe he's not as awesome as his accounting of his life story is, but he seems awesome. You know, if he was like Balthier from Final Fantasy XII, I'd be like, oh yeah, this guy's cool. But he's not. Even when he embellishes, I'm like, ugh, I can't stand both. So I don't get it. I don't understand the appeal. But, you know, I guess to each their own. And then last for today, we have A Game of Fate. This is, I would say, more just smut, which is fine. And there's actually a review that I think is hilarious because I'm like, I mean, there you go. That's the person for this book. This person says, does this book add much? Oh, okay, let me give context really quick. So, if you don't know, A Game of Fate is a Hades Persephone retelling, and it's pretty modern. Hades has a club, a nightclub, and Persephone is a journalism student, and she shows up in his club, and just immediately he wants to bang her, and then there's a lot of wanting to bang and banging throughout the story, and there's like every now and then a plot point that either pushes them toward doing it with each other or interrupts them doing it with each other. But a lot of the story revolves around them getting it on. And I guess it's actually a companion novel because the Persephone perspective was written first. And then we go through and rewrite the story from Hades' perspective. So this person's referring to a book 1. They're referring to the Persephone perspective. It's the same timeline though. So this reviewer says, does this book add much to the plot of book 1? No. Did I read this book for plot? Also no. If you're like me and reading this book for territorial, ready to bone town, 24/7 Hades, then hot damn, will this pay off? I'm pleased, no complaints. I'm like, that's exactly what that book was. I'm just confused because I guess there's a lot of people that's what they're looking for. It's not what I'm looking for, but that's okay. But I'm just surprised because I think there have been some ways that I've seen this book discussed where it doesn't feel like they're discussing it like that. Because that makes sense to me. That does make sense. If there are people that are like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm like, well, that's what that book was. But I've seen other people talk about like, oh my gosh, I love the two of them together. And I kind of went into it being like, I can't wait to ship these two. And then I'm like, I don't ship them at all. Why would I ship them? It's like, I just can ship any random two strangers together and be like, those two together now. And that, I don't know, that's to me what that book was, not how I've seen other people discuss it. But I guess what confuses me is people that aren't going into it as this reviewer did. I'm kind of like, what did you get from it? Because that's what it was. It'd be like going into a comedy and then being like, that book devastated me. And I'd be like, oh, that book devastated you? Huh. So it doesn't make sense to me. That's it though, for some times where my list is over there, by the way, if you keep seeing my eyes look over there. But anyway, that's it for some moments when the hype didn't necessarily make sense to me. Now that I've gotten through this list, Luna, I guess, needs to move. She's always around, by the way. If she's not in this corner, she's usually in that corner. But anyway, that's it. Let me know if sometimes, even for books that you really enjoy, where you're really shocked that they have reached certain levels of hype. I would love to know. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.